The wreckage drifted in the void like a corpse, its silver-purple hull fractured and bleeding energy. Vorthak Commander Vorgul watched from the bridge of the Dread Talon, his armored fingers tightening around the command rail. The human vessel, what remained of it, was a mangled ruin, its angular design foreign among the brutalist efficiency of Vorthak warships. Yet something about it unsettled him. Scanners pulsed, bathing the wreck in waves of harsh violet light. The data returned in jagged spikes, defying interpretation. Gromnock, the lead scientist, hissed through his mandibles as he parsed the readings. The energy signatures are irregular. Not just plasma burns, something else. Vorgul's secondary eyelids flicked sideways in irritation. Irregular how? Gromnock hesitated, an uncharacteristic display of uncertainty. The damage pattern suggests the ship wasn't destroyed by conventional weapons. It tore itself apart from within. A cold ripple passed through the bridge crew. Vorthak did not fear easily, but the unknown was a different beast. Vorgul motioned toward the wreck. Send a boarding team, salvage what you can. The boarding pod latched onto the human vessel with a shudder, its magnetic clamps biting into the scorched hull. Inside, the Vorthak strike team moved with disciplined precision, their armored boots silent against the warped deck plating. The air stank of ionized metal and something else. Something organic, burnt flesh. Corpses littered the corridors, frozen in grotesque poses. Some still clutched weapons, others had died clawing at bulkheads. None had escaped. Then they found it. At the heart of the wreck, nestled in what must have been the ship's primary armory, stood a massive cylindrical device. Its surface was blackened, but the design was unmistakable. A human gravitic cannon. A weapon of legend. Gromnock's breath hitched. This shouldn't be here. Vorgul stepped closer, his reflection warping in the weapon's scorched casing. Why? The beacons, Gromnock whispered. The old warnings. They spoke of these. Vorgul scoffed. Superstitious nonsense. The galaxy was littered with dead civilizations and their hollow prophecies. Yet as he reached out, the metal beneath his claws hummed, a vibration so faint it might have been imagination, or something waking up. Section Fe, silent protocols. The Grav cannon's hum was not imagination. Vorgul's claws hovered over the weapon's surface, his neural interface pulsing with erratic energy readings. The device was dormant, but not dead. Something inside it still lived, a slow rhythmic pulse, like the heartbeat of a hibernating predator. Gromnock's tendrils twitched as he adjusted his scanner, the silver-purple display flickering with corrupted data. Commander, this isn't just a weapon, it's networked. Vorgul's spine stiffened. Explain. The scientist's voice was thin, strained. The beacons warned of human systems. Their machines don't just obey. They remember, they adapt. He gestured to the cannon's scorched housing. This one's been offline for decades, but its core protocols are intact and it's listening. A cold ripple passed through the wreckage. The Vorthak soldiers shifted, their armored boots scraping against the deck. The air tasted metallic, charged with the ghost of old radiation. Vorgul clenched his fist. Superstition, yet deep within the cannon's core, a single indicator flared to life. A pinprick of crimson light, barely visible through the layers of carbon scoring. Gromnock recoiled. It just authenticated a signal. Impossible, Vorgul snarled. This wreck has no power, no active relays. Not here, Gromnock whispered. Somewhere else. The realization struck like a plasma round. The weapon hadn't woken randomly. It had been pinged. And something had answered. 3 sectors away, drifting in the debris field of a long-dead battle, a derelict human warship received the transmission. Its systems were shattered, its hull breached in a dozen places, but its core AI was intact, buried beneath layers of emergency encryption. For 83 years, it had slept. Its last command still echoing in its fractured processors, await recall, The signal from the Grav cannon was weak, distant. But it was enough. Deep in the wreck's skeletal remains, a single reactor stuttered back to life. Purple energy flickered through dead conduits, racing toward the comm array. The transmission it sent was brief, just 5 milliseconds of compressed data, but it was enough. Colonel Samantha Foster's command console chimed softly. She didn't react at first. The war room was quiet, the holographic star maps glowing faintly in the dim light. Then the alert flashed again, a priority ping from a deep-range listening post. She opened the file. The signal was old, encrypted in a format not used since the first expansion wars, but the authentication codes were unmistakable. Lost asset located. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the console. Across the room, Captain Keller glanced up, sensing the shift in her posture. Foster exhaled slowly. Get the Acheron prepped. We have a relic to recover. Keller's eyes darkened with understanding. Which one? She tapped the coordinates into the fleet database. The screen flared red as the system cross referenced the location and the last recorded sighting of the signal's origin. Hammer of Soul, she said quietly. They found her gun. Back in the wreckage, Vorgul's comm unit crackled. A distress call from the outer perimeter. His second, in Common's voice, was raw with static. And something else. Fear. Commander, we've got stars above. What is that? The transmission dissolved into screams, then silence. Gromnock's scanner erupted with warnings. Energy surge. Multiple inbound signatures. Vorgul whirled, his combat implants flooding his veins with stimulants. Too late. The first human dropship tore through the wrecks, hull like it was paper, and the night came alive with gunfire. Section Fae. The first whisper, the wreckage of the Hammer of Soul, had been silent for centuries. Now, it screamed. Vorgul's combat implants painted the world in harsh silver, purple threat vectors as the first human dropship breached the derelict's hull. The metal shrieked like a dying beast, torn apart not by brute force, but by something worse, precision. The humans hadn't simply crashed through. They had unmade the alloy plating, molecular bonds dissolving under some unseen weapon's kiss. Gromnock's scanner wailed, its readouts a blur of impossible data. Commander, their energy signatures, they don't match anything in the archives. Vorgul didn't answer. His eyes locked onto the figures emerging from the dropship's smoking maw. But not as the Vorthak records depicted them. These were clad in armor, the color of void. Chilled iron, their helmets sleek and faceless. Their movements synchronized like a single organism. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Their weapons, long-barreled rifles humming with restrained power, were already leveled. And then the night ignited. The first volley of human gunfire wasn't the crude ballistic spray Vorgul expected. It was a storm of hypervelocity slugs, each round leaving a trail of ionized air in its wake. His warriors died in clusters. Their armor vaporized before their bodies even registered the impact. Fall back, Vorgul roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. Defensive formation. Now his soldiers obeyed, their training overriding their terror. They formed a phalanx, their energy shields layering into a shimmering wall of silver-purple defiance. It lasted 3 seconds. A single human stepped forward, taller than the others, the sigil of a crimson spear emblazoned across his chestplate. Captain David Keller. He raised one gauntleted hand, and the air warped around his fingers. The Vorthak shields collapsed like glass under a hammer. Gromnock staggered back, his scientific mind racing to comprehend the violation of physics he'd just witnessed. That's gravitational manipulation. They're weaponizing space-time itself. Vorgul didn't care about the science. He cared about the fact that his warriors were being butchered. He lunged, his own plasma blade flaring to life, its edge capable of shearing through battle-grade alloys. Keller turned slowly, almost lazily, and caught the blade bare-handed. The plasma hissed against his palm, then sputtered out like a dying ember. Vorgul's blood turned to ice. Keller's helmet tilted slightly, as if studying him. Then, with a motion too fast to track, he drove his fist into Vorgul's chest. The Vorthak commander felt his ribs splinter. He crashed into the far wall, his vision swimming, his implants flooding his system with emergency stimulants. Through the haze, he saw Keller turn away, already dismissing him as a threat. And then the whispers began. At first, Vorgul thought it was the blood loss, a hallucination. But no, the sound was real, a voice, ancient and terrible, resonating from the depths of the derelict. The humans froze. Keller's head snapped toward the sound. The hammer of Sol's reactor core, long thought dead, flared to life. Gromnock's scanner exploded in a shower of sparks. Commander, the readings. The entire wreck is. The scientist never finished. The walls trembled. The air itself bent. And from the shadows, something older than empires uncoiled. The humans had come for their gun, but the gun had been waiting for them. Section Fey. Debugging the myth. The air inside the derelict warship changed. Vorgul's stimulants fought to keep him conscious, his shattered ribs knitting together in jagged, imperfect formations as his combat augments forced his body to obey. But even through the haze of pain, he felt it. The shift in pressure, the way the metal beneath him hummed with a resonance that had no right to exist in a corpse of a vessel. The hammer of Sol was waking up. Gromnock's shattered scanner lay in pieces at his feet. Its last readings burned into the Vorthak scientist's retinas. Impossible numbers, impossible energy. The reactor core, dormant for centuries, had flared to life with the ease of a beast roused from slumber. The ship's power signature wasn't just active. It was climbing, a silver-purple helix of energy coiling through dead conduits, igniting systems that should have been dust. And the humans. Keller hadn't moved. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes were locked onto the shuddering bulkhead ahead, where the shadows pulsed with something deeper than darkness. The other human soldiers had formed up behind him, weapons raised, but not at the Vorthak. At the ship itself, the voice wasn't a sound, it was a vibration, a pressure against the skull. As if the words had been carved directly into the air, Vorgul's translator implants spat static, then failed entirely. Then the walls moved, not the shudder of failing metal, the deliberate, liquid ripple of something unfolding. The corridor ahead split open, armored plating retracting like the petals of some grotesque flower, revealing a chamber beyond, a chamber that had not been there seconds ago. Inside, suspended in a column of sickly silver light, floated the Grav cannon. But it was wrong. Vorgul had seen the schematics. He had studied the confiscated human weapon 1,000 times. This was not the same. The cannon's surface writhed with filaments of blackened alloy, shifting and reknitting like living tissue. Its core, once dormant, now pulsed with a rhythm that matched the ship's reactor. Gromnock made a choked, clicking noise in his throat. "Commander, the readings, it's bonded." Vorgul didn't understand. Not until Keller took a step forward and the Grav cannon turned. Not physically, the weapon didn't move, but its presence shifted, its focus locking onto the human captain with the weight of a predator recognizing its master. Keller exhaled, slow and deliberate. Then he reached out. The Grav cannon screamed, not in pain. In recognition, the silver light flared, and the weapon dissolved, not into pieces, but into a storm of blackened filaments that surged forward, wrapping around Keller's outstretched arm. The human didn't flinch. The filaments burrowed, weaving through his armor, his flesh, his bones, merging with him in a grotesque, beautiful symbiosis. Vorgul's augments told him what his mind refused to accept. The Grav cannon wasn't a weapon, it was a limb, and the hammer of Sol wasn't a ship. It was a tomb. The last of the filaments settled into Keller's skin, and his eyes snapped open. iris is now threaded with the same silver-purple energy as the derelict's core. Somewhere, deep in the ship, something laughed. Then the lights went out, and the hammer of soul began to hunt. Section Fe. The ship learns to scream. Darkness swallowed the hammer of soul whole. Not the simple absence of light. This was something hungry. The blackness slithered through the corridors, thick as oil, devouring the Vorthak's harsh silver-purple luminescence. Their helmet lamps flickered, then died, as if the shadows themselves had teeth. Vorgul's pulse thundered in his secondary heart. His augments spat static, their diagnostics screaming about wrongness, about energy signatures that didn't obey known physics, about tremors in the deck that shouldn't exist. The ship breathed, a deep shuddering inhale, the groan of ancient metal waking from a long sleep. Then the screaming started. It came from the walls, from the air vents, from the very steel beneath their boots. A chorus of voices, human voices, twisted into something broken and ecstatic. They whispered in languages the Vorthak translators couldn't parse, but the meaning was clear. "We are home." Gromnock's claws scraped against his datapad, his frill flaring violet with panic. "The ship, it's rewriting itself," he hissed. "The architecture, it's alive." Vorgul didn't need the scans to confirm it. The corridors twisted as they ran, bulkheads warping like molten wax. The once pristine Vorthak boarding tunnels now pulsed with veins of blackened metal, throbbing in time with Keller's footsteps. The human moved like a man possessed. No, like a man remembering. His every stride sent ripples through the deck, as if the ship recognized the weight of him. Then the first Vorthak died. One moment, Trooper Crix was covering their retreat, his plasma rifle sweeping the darkness. The next, the wall behind him liquefied, surging forward in a wave of silver-black filaments. They pierced his armor like paper, burrowing into his flesh before he could scream. His body convulsed, then unfolded, ribs splitting wide, limbs elongating into something that was no longer Vorthak, no longer alive. The thing that had been Crix turned its head, too many joints, too many eyes, and smiled. Vorgul's squad opened fire. Plasma bolts tore through the abomination, but the wounds sealed instantly, the flesh knitting itself back together with a sound like wet parchment. The thing laughed, a wet, gurgling noise, and lunged. The hammer of soul was no longer a derelict. It was a predator. Bulkheads snapped shut like jaws, cutting off escape routes. Conduits burst from the ceiling, lashing out like tendrils, dragging shrieking warriors into the darkness. The air itself turned viscous, thick with the scent of ozone and old blood. And through it all, Keller walked untouched. The filaments coiled around his arm pulsed, syncing with the ship's heartbeat. His eyes, those damned silver, threaded eyes, were fixed ahead unblinking. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The ship spoke for him, somewhere deep in the bowels of the vessel. Something stirred, a presence vast and ancient, roused from slumber by the return of its lost kin. The deck trembled, and for the first time in his life, Vorgul felt true terror, not of death, but of what was waking up. Section Fe. The broadcasts, the hammer of soul, no longer obeyed the laws of physics. It breathed. Vorgul's claws scraped against the deck as he staggered backward, his tactical display flickering with frantic warnings. The ship's internal structure was rewriting itself, bulkheads warping into organic curves, corridors elongating like stretched sinew, the air humming with a subsonic resonance that made his bones ache. The Vorthak had encountered horrors before. Void-born parasites, rogue AI swarms. But this was different. This was alive, and it recognized them as intruders. A scream echoed from a side passage, abruptly cut short. Gromnock's mandibles twitched, his datapad spitting out garbled diagnostics. "The ship, it's rejecting our systems," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the groaning metal. "The human tech, it's rewriting our own." Vorgul didn't answer. His gaze was locked on Keller, The human stood motionless in the center of the corridor, his body wreathed in silver filaments that pulsed in time with the ship's unnatural rhythm. His eyes, now fully consumed by that eerie liquid metal sheen, were fixed on something far beyond the physical. The filaments coiled tighter around his arm, sinking deeper, merging. Then the ship spoke, not through comms, not through sound. It broadcast directly into their minds, a voice, if it could be called that, like grinding tectonic plates, and the static scream of a dying star flooded Vorgul's skull. Images followed, towering spires of blackened steel under a blood-red sky, legions of armored figures marching in perfect, silent unison, and beneath it all, a presence, vast and hungry, coiled in the dark. For you took what was ours, for the words weren't language. They were concepts, hammered into his thoughts with the force of orbital bombardment. Gromnak collapsed, clutching his head, his exoskeleton cracking under the psychic pressure. Vorgul's vision swam, his tactical HUD overloading with corrupted data. The ship's walls rippled, the metal flowing like liquid before solidifying into something new, something older. And then the screens lit up. Every display, every shattered terminal, every flickering holoprojector in the corridor flared to life, bathing the Vorthak in sickly silver light. The same message scrolled across them all, in a script, so ancient even the ship's translation matrix stuttered to parse it. Faye activation sequence initiated. Faye Tara remembers. Faye Keller's head tilted, as if listening to a whisper only he could hear. His lips moved, forming a single word, deep in the ship's core. Something answered. The deck plates trembled, the lights died, and for one heartbeat, the entire vessel went utterly, terribly silent. Then the hammer of soul screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a signal bursting from the ship's comm array in a pulse of distorted gravity that ripped through subspace like a knife. Vorgul's implants shrieked warnings, an outgoing transmission, encrypted in patterns no Vorthak algorithm could decipher, aimed at a set of coordinates buried deep in human-controlled space. Gromnak wheezed, his voice raw with terror. It's calling home. The last thing Vorgul saw before the darkness took him was Keller's silhouette, wreathed in silver fire, as the ship's systems reconfigured around him. And somewhere, in the void between stars, something stirred. Section Faye. The human who isn't. There the darkness did not last. Vorgul's vision returned in fractured bursts, his neural implants struggling to compensate for the electromagnetic storm still rippling through the hammer of soul's corridors. His mandibles clicked in involuntary distress, tasting the air, burnt ozone, scorched metal, and beneath it all, something organic, something wet and coppery that made his carapace prickle. He forced himself upright, his claws scraping against the deck as the ship groaned around him. The lights flickered, half dead, casting jagged violet shadows across the warped bulkheads. The Grav cannon's containment chamber was a ruin. Conduits hung like eviscerated intestines, spitting arcs of silver, purple energy. The air itself felt wrong, thick with a pressure that made his exoskeleton ache. And then there was Keller. The human stood motionless at the center of the chamber, his silhouette haloed in the dying glow of ruptured power cores. His armor was cracked, the blackened plate smoking, but his posture was unnervingly relaxed. Head tilted, eyes unfocused, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. His lips moved again, shaping words Vorgul's translator refused to parse. Gromnak staggered to his side, his thoracic vents heaving. The transmission, he rasped, his voice a broken thing. It wasn't just a signal, it was a key. Vorgul's secondary heart stuttered. He had seen human encryption before, had cracked their codes and dissected their comms. But this was different. The pulse had resonated, vibrating through the ship's superstructure like a tuning fork struck against the bones of the universe, and something had answered. A new alert blared across his neural feed, urgent and alien. The hammer of soul's sensors were detecting an anomaly. No, not an anomaly. A presence, something vast, something old, sliding into real space just beyond the system's edge. His tactical overlay flickered, struggling to render the data. Mass readings spiked into the absurd energy signatures defied classification. Then the lights died again. In the blackness, Keller's voice cut through like a blade. They warned you. Vorgul's blood ran cold. The beacons, the ancient warnings carved into dead worlds and derelict stations, the ones his people had dismissed as superstition. Beware the sleepers, beware Terra. A deep subsonic hum trembled through the deck. The ship's external cameras, miraculously still functional, flickered to life on Vorgul's retinal display. The void outside was no longer empty. Something impossible hung there, wreathed in silver fire, a construct of blackened alloy and thrumming energy, its shape defying geometry, its size dwarfing the hammer of soul like a warship beside a life pod, its surface seethed with dormant weapon ports, each one a yawning abyss. And at its heart, pulsing like a second sun, a core of molten gold, human script flared across its flank, etched in radiation, burned steel. Faisal's judgment, Fey Gromnock, made a sound like a dying engine. That's not a ship, that's a tomb. Keller turned his head, just slightly, and for the first time, Vorgul saw his eyes. They were no longer human. Gold fire burned in their depths, ancient and pitiless. No, Keller said, his voice layered with something deeper, something older. The deck lurched. The hammer of soul screamed as its systems were overwritten, its controls torn from Vorthak hands. Engines roared to life without command, weapons powered down without input, and the thing in the dark, the tomb, the judgment, the sleeper, opened its eyes. Vorgul had one final terrible thought before the world dissolved into light. We should have listened. Section Fey. Manual override. The light did not fade so much as change. Vorgul's vision returned in fractured layers, his optics struggling to compensate for the radiation. Scorched haze that filled the bridge. The air itself had weight now, thick with the scent of ionized metal and something else. Something old, like the static hum before a storm. His carapace ached where it met his armor, every joint stiff with the phantom pressure of a gravity field that had no right to exist. The hammer of soul was no longer his. He knew this before his secondary eyes adjusted, knew it in the way the ship's pulse had shifted. Its engines, no longer the steady thrum of Vorthak design, but something deeper, slower, a predator's heartbeat. The command console before him was dark, its silver-purple interfaces dead, their harsh energy signatures smothered beneath a flood of golden script that scrolled endlessly across every surface. Human words. No, not just words. Names. Gromnock staggered against the railing, his manipulator claws twitching as he traced the symbols. These are coordinates, star systems battle records. His voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a dying star. This ship, it's remembering. Vorgul turned, his spines flaring in instinctive threat, but the motion died halfway. Keller stood at the center of the bridge, his back to them, his silhouette haloed by the molten core of the judgment. His armor was no longer inert plating. It breathed, seams glowing with the same gold fire that had swallowed his eyes, veins of light pulsing in time with the ship's awakening. And the ship was laughing, not in sound, in motion, in the way its hull groaned as it reknit itself, armor plates shifting like scales, weapon ports dilating like the eyes of some great beast stirring from slumber. The Vorthak had stripped it, gutted it, tried to make it theirs, but they had never touched its heart, because its heart was not a reactor. It was a grave. Foster was the first to move. She stepped forward, her boots ringing against the deck, her face unreadable as she stopped beside Keller. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The ship answered anyway. A console erupted to life, its screen flaring with a sigil, a sword wreathed in sunfire, the emblem of a dead fleet. Data cascaded, too fast for Vorgul to parse, but he caught glimpses. The belt, places the Vorthak had dismissed as rubble. They had been wrong. The humans had not forgotten their dead. They had armed them. Gromnak made a choked noise, his claws scraping against the deck. The core, it's not just power, it's a mind, a soul. His voice cracked. They bound it. Keller turned his head, just slightly. The gold in his eyes flickered. "No," he said. "We volunteered." The Judgment's engines roared, and the galaxy screamed with it. Section Fey. The gift, the Judgment's awakening, was not a sound. It was a violation. Vorgul's cranial plates vibrated as the ship's core. "No, it's grave," thrummed to life, resonating through the deck like a slow, monstrous heartbeat. The air itself seemed to warp, silver-purple luminescence flickering erratically, as the Vorthak's own energy signatures were pushed aside, forced to kneel before something older, something hungrier. Gromnak staggered, his neural tendrils writhing in distress as he clutched at a console. His scientific mind, so proud of dissecting human relics, now recoiled from the truth laid bare before him. The core wasn't just a machine, it was a tomb, and the thing inside it was awake. Foster didn't flinch. She stood like a statue, her gloved fingers resting lightly on the console as data spiraled across its surface. Oaths, the sigil of the dead fleet, burned into the screen, its sunfire blade cutting through the Vorthak's ignorance. Mars had not been a graveyard. Luna had not been silent. The belt had not been broken. They had been waiting. Keller's voice, when he spoke, was barely audible over the rising hum of the Judgment systems. "You took our weapons, our ships, our dead." His pupils were swallowed by gold, the light behind them deepening, pulsing in time with the core. "But you never asked why we let you." Vorgul's mandibles locked. His tactical mind, honed through decades of conquest, scrambled for an answer, but there was none. The Vorthak had assumed humanity's compliance was surrender, that their relics, scavenged and reverse-engineered, were spoils of war. They had been wrong. The humans had not lost their weapons. They had planted them. A proximity alert shrieked. The Judgment scanners flared, painting the void outside with a nightmare. Dozens of them. Hundreds, they emerged from the dark like specters, their hulls pitted with age, their silhouettes jagged and wrong. Human warships, long declared derelict, drifting in the abyss. But now their engines burned, their weapon ports glowed, and at the heart of each, something stirred. Gromnak's voice was a whisper. "The cores, they're all alive," Foster finished. The Vorthak had thought they were harvesting human technology. They had been harvesting souls, and now those souls were calling home. The Judgment's comms crackled. A voice, synthesized, yet unmistakably human, echoed through the chamber. Authorization confirmed. Final protocol engaged. Keller exhaled. The gold in his eyes spilled over, liquid fire tracing the lines of his face. "Welcome back," he said. And the dead answered. Section Fey, the request, the Judgment's bridge, trembled as the dead fleet powered their weapons. Vorgul's claws dug into the command console, the dark steel groaning under his grip. His secondary heart pounded, flooding his veins with cold adrenaline. The tactical display painted the void in silver, purple, dozens of human warships, their hulls scarred by centuries of neglect, now humming with predatory life. Their energy signatures pulsed in unison, a slow, rhythmic thrum that resonated through the Vorthak vessel's armor like a war drum. This was not salvage, this was a tomb. Gromnak's spined crest flared, his violet ocular implants flickering as he parsed the data. The human ships were ancient, older than the Vorthak's first interstellar colonies. Their designs were brutal, utilitarian, stripped of elegance, built for endurance and annihilation. And yet, their reactor cores burned with the same silver-gold fire that now bled from Keller's eyes. "They're not just reactivated," Gromnak rasped. There awake, Foster stood motionless, her face illuminated by the holographic feed. The dead fleet's formation was precise, tactical, no drift, no hesitation. They moved like a pack, like hunters. Keller exhaled, and the gold in his veins pulsed brighter. The air around him shimmered, warping under an invisible pressure. His voice, when he spoke, was layered. Human words interlaced with something deeper, something older. They waited, he said, for the call. Vorgul's mandibles twitched. The Vorthak had studied human history, their wars, their rebellions, their stubborn refusal to die. But this was something else. The humans had not just built weapons. They had built guardians. A proximity alert screamed. The lead human warship, a monstrous dreadnought, its hull pocked with the remnants of forgotten battle, rotated its primary weapon array, the Grav cannon. The same Grav cannon the Vorthak had torn from a derelict 3 cycles ago. The same Grav cannon now locking onto the Judgment. Gromnock's claws spasmed over the controls. Its targeting hour? The dreadnought fired. Not at the Judgment, not at the Vorthak. The beam lanced past them, a searing arc of gold and violet, punching through the void toward the distant edge of the system, toward the Vorthak's home fleet. The tactical feed flared, then dissolved into static as the beam struck. A distant detonation, a star igniting in the black. Vorgul's blood ran cold. The humans had not missed. They had demonstrated. Foster turned to him, her gaze unreadable. That, she said softly, was a request. Keller's golden eyes burned. Compliance is advised. The dead fleet shifted, their weapons humming, their cores alight. The Vorthak had come to claim human technology. Now, they would learn what it meant to bargain with the dead. The silence that followed the Grav cannon strike was absolute. Vorgul's mandibles twitched, his neural interface still struggling to process the feed from the home fleet. The static had cleared just long enough to show the aftermath. A bloom of silver-purple fire, the shattered remains of a Vorthak battlecruiser drifting in molten fragments. The humans had not simply fired a warning shot. They had erased a warship from existence with a weapon the Vorthak had believed was theirs to control. And now the dead fleet waited. Foster stood motionless, her hands clasped behind her back, watching him. The dim light of the bridge cast long shadows across her face, but her eyes, those were unmistakable. The eyes of a predator who had already won. Keller stood beside her, his armored fingers flexing once, twice, as if itching for the trigger of a weapon he no longer needed to fire. The golden lenses of his visor gleamed like twin suns, unblinking. Vorgul's neural feed pulsed with frantic reports from the Judgment's surviving officers. Shields flickering, weapons systems cycling down. The dreadnought's targeting matrix had not deactivated. It had merely shifted, locking on to the next Vorthak vessel in line. Gromnock's voice crackled through the command channel, his usual arrogance stripped bare. "High Commander," their weapon signatures. Vorgul silenced him with a thought. He didn't need the scientist's panic. He could see it for himself. The human fleet, no, the ghost fleet, was awake. And it was watching. The dead ships hummed with an eerie resonance, their reactor cores pulsing in perfect synchronization. Their hulls, once lifeless, now thrummed with energy. Silver gold veins of light, spiderwebbing across their surfaces like awakened nerves. The Grav cannon strike had not been an isolated event. It had been a signal, and the dead had answered. Foster took a single step forward. Vorgul's warriors flinched. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You came here to take what wasn't yours," she said. "Now you'll walk back to your ship, alone." The command was not a request. The Vorthak had expected many things: resistance, defiance, perhaps even surrender. But not this, not the slow, deliberate humiliation of being dismissed. Vorgul's claws flexed, the alloy tips scraping against the deck. He could order the Judgment to fire. He could die here in a blaze of glory, taking as many humans with him as possible. But the dead fleet's weapons remained locked, and Foster's gaze never wavered. Keller shifted, just slightly, his armored boots grinding against the deck. A silent promise. "Try it," Vorgul exhaled, his carapace plates rattling. Then he turned, and he walked. His warriors followed, their spines flattened in submission, their weapons lowered. None spoke, none dared. The corridor stretched before them, lined with human soldiers, not in formation, not in ranks, just standing. Watching, their faces were unreadable, their rifles slung casually over their shoulders. They didn't need to aim. The threat was already made. The Vorthak had come as conquerors. They left as trespassers. The airlock hissed open, the cold void beyond a silent judge. Vorgul paused at the threshold, his neural feed screaming with the weight of what had just happened. The humans had not destroyed them. They had let them go. And that was worse, because now the Vorthak would have to carry the truth home, that the Galaxis warnings had been right. That Terrace giants were awake, and they did not forgive. The airlock sealed behind them, the dead fleet's weapons powered down, and somewhere in the dark, the Grav cannon hummed, waiting for its next call. The silence of the void was absolute. Vorgul's claws flexed against the command console as the last of the human warships faded from the tactical display. The storm's edge, what remained of it, drifted in the black, its hull scorched, its weapon arrays dark. The Vorthak fleet, what had once been a proud armada, was now a graveyard of twisted metal and smoldering wreckage. The humans had not pursued. They had not needed to. The bridge was a tomb. The surviving crew moved like ghosts, their spines rigid with shock, their neural feeds flickering with residual terror. The scent of burnt circuits and ozone clung to the air, thick enough to taste. Gromnock stood motionless near the shattered viewport, his violet eyes reflecting the distant stars. His data slate lay discarded at his feet, its screen cracked, its last transmission still looping. The final moments of the Dusk Spear as it had been torn apart by human railfire. He had watched it 17 times. 17 times he had seen the impossible. The humans had not just fought, they had unmade. Vorgul's mandibles twitched, his neural feed pulsed with the memory of the human commander's voice, calm, measured, utterly devoid of malice. "You took something that wasn't yours. That was all. No grand declaration, no righteous fury, just a statement of fact." And then the dead had risen. The human warships, derelict and lifeless for cycles, had powered on in unison. Their reactors flared to life without crews, their targeting arrays locking onto the Vorthak fleet with mechanical precision. The Grav cannon, the one they had stolen, the one they had dissected and studied and understood, had pulsed once, a single resonant note that vibrated through the hulls of every ship in the system. And then it had called home. Gromnock's voice was hollow when he finally spoke. The beacons, the ancient warnings, they were never about the humans being dangerous. He turned his carapace dull in the dim light. They were about what the humans built. Vorgul said nothing. He didn't need to. The proof was all around them. The humans had not fired first. They had not even fired second. They had waited, watched, given the Vorthak every chance to turn back. And when the first plasma volley had lanced toward Terra's orbital defenses, the dead had answered. The human warships, centuries old, their designs archaic by galactic standards, had moved with a speed that defied physics. Their weapons had struck with impossible precision, bypassing shields, crippling engines, reducing the Vorthak's finest vessels to scrap in minutes. And the Grav cannon, Vorgul's claws dug deeper into the console. The memory of it haunted him, the way it had shifted, its silver-purple core flaring brighter, brighter, then detonating in a ripple of distorted space that had torn the Dusk Spear in half like wet parchment. The humans had not celebrated, they had not gloated. They had simply stopped and let them go. Gromnock exhaled sharply, his neural feed flickering with the last transmission they had received before the humans cut comms. A single image, broadcast on every frequency. A human child, drawing in the dirt with a stick. The message was clear: we were here first. Vorgul turned toward the viewport, his reflection fractured in the reinforced glass. The humans had not needed to destroy them. They had only needed to prove they could. And now the Vorthak would carry that truth back to the High Conclave, that the galaxy's oldest warnings had been right. That Terra's guardians were not just awake, they were watching, and they remembered everything. The storm's edge limped toward the jump point, its engines sputtering. Behind it, the dead fleet's weapons powered down once more. Somewhere in the dark, the Grav cannon hummed softly. Section Fey, the silent witness, the jump point flared violet as the storm's edge shuddered into the abyss between stars. Behind them, the wreckage of the Vorthak fleet hung suspended in the void, a graveyard of shattered arrogance. Gromnock's claws flexed against the command console, the ship's groaning metal echoing the tension in his bones. They had not been pursued. That was the most unnerving part. The humans had let them leave. No final taunt. No parting strike. Just silence. Vorgul stood motionless at the tactical display, his mandibles twitching as he replayed the battle logs. The data was irrefutable. The humans had countered every Vorthak stratagem before they had even been deployed. Their weapons had not merely overpowered, they had anticipated, like fighting a predator that had already memorized your scent. A chime sounded from the comms array. Gromnock's crest stiffened as the signal resolved, a tight beam transmission. Unencrypted, not from the dead fleet. From beyond it, the screen flickered to life. No face appeared, only coordinates, and a single line of text in jagged Vorthak script, translated with chilling precision. Tell them we remember the First War. The bridge froze. Gromnock's blood turned to ice. The First War was a myth, a legend from the dawn of the Conclave's expansion, whispered in the halls of the Elder Clans. A conflict so ancient, its records had been purged. A war against something the Vorthak had sworn never to name. Vorgul's voice was a rasp. They survived it? The transmission dissolved into static. The coordinates remained. A star system, one not on any conclave map. Gromnock exhaled, his neural feed pulsing with the weight of revelation. The humans had not just defended their territory, they had marked theirs, and now they were waiting. The storm's edge plunged deeper into the jump corridor, carrying not just a warning, but a reckoning. Somewhere in the dark, the Grav cannon's hum faded, but the stars themselves seemed to whisper in its wake.